Jessica is putting her things in a small U-Haul truck and setting off on her journey, consisting of 4 days. After driving for a while with no other cars around, Jessica sees a slow-moving Jeep in the distance. When she tries to pass it, a truck appears suddenly, but the Jeep purposely blocks her. Just in time, she accelerates, narrowly avoiding the truck. The Jeep then speeds up, and its driver starts honking aggressively. When the road forks, the Jeep takes a different path, leaving Jessica to wonder who is driving. That night, while filling up her gas tank, Jessica calls her dad and admits she left early to avoid her mom. Later, at the motel, she ignores her mom's calls and breaks down in tears while looking at photos of her husband. The next morning, as Jessica gets into her car, a goofy-looking man named Sam approaches her and apologizes for blocking the road the day before, making up excuses. Jessica uncomfortably accepts his apology. Feeling uneasy, she tries to leave, but he questions her, asking about her name, where she lives, and where she's headed. After reluctantly providing answers, she drives off as he ominously says he'll see her around. A little while later, Jessica encounters the same stranger blocking the road with his hood up, clearly faking car trouble. She locks her doors and tries to drive around him, but he blocks her path. He approaches her passenger door, and she rolls down the window just a bit. He explains that his car broke down and asks for help moving it, showing his arm in a sling. Sensing the danger, Jessica refuses to help him and offers to call for assistance instead. When he declines and persists, she improvises an excuse about a meeting and drives away swiftly. That night, at a rest stop, Jessica senses danger around her. A moment later, when the stranger's Jeep arrives, Jessica hurries to her car. The stranger exits his vehicle and attempts to approach her, but she manages to drive off. However, her path is blocked by a van, allowing the stranger to catch up to her. He accuses her of nearly running him over, but Jessica ignores him and maneuvers around the van to get away. Later, fearing the stranger is following her, Jessica calls the police, but the passing car turns out to be harmless. Sometime later, while still driving in the dark, Jessica loses control of her car and has to pull over into a ditch. Checking the tires of her car and the U-Haul, she discovers that one of the tires has been slashed. Down the road, she sees a car approaching, and she tries to start her car. Suddenly, the stranger's Jeep pulls up beside her, and the stranger gets out of the car, wielding a tire iron in his hand. Using the tire iron, he breaks Jessica's window and opens the door. Despite her efforts to resist, he overpowers her, delivering a punch and injecting her with a sedative. The following day, Jessica wakes up in the basement and peeks through the gap under the door to check if anyone's around. She hears footsteps above, and then someone exits the house. Jessica calls out to them, and they come to the window. To her surprise, it's the same stranger. He warns her to be quiet. That night, when the stranger enters the basement, Jessica offers him money and promises not to tell anyone about their encounter. The stranger smiles and calmly asks if she thinks she's the first one to say that. Afterward, the stranger tells her to take her clothes off, but Jessica requests to use the bathroom first. He allows her to leave, but as she tries, he forcefully slams her against the wall. Then, he pins her down and cruelly taunts her by playing videos of Jessica with her late husband that he found on her iPad. The stranger asks her about the death of her husband, and Jessica reveals that he took his own life with a gun. After mentally torturing her, he leaves the basement and locks the door behind him. The following morning, Jessica wakes up to the sound of the stranger's Jeep starting up, and she rushes to the door to attempt to open it. Seeing the key in the lock, she pulls a nail out of one of the beams, pushes her sweater under the gap of the door, and uses the nail to push the key out and onto her sweater on the other side. She then pulls her sweater from under the gap with the key and unlocks the door. Jessica carefully heads up the stairs, and when she enters the kitchen, she sees the stranger walking toward the cabin. She rushes to hide in a closet near the front door. The stranger enters the cabin and sits at the table, preparing himself a snack. He then calls his wife and daughter and tells them he is on a business trip. When the stranger ends his phone call and heads downstairs, Jessica jumps out of the closet and runs into the forest as fast as she can. Moments later, the stranger comes out and runs after her. Jessica is sprinting barefoot through the forest. Suddenly, she stumbles over a stick, and it pokes into her foot. She screams in agony when pulling out the stick and keeps on running, despite the pain. Walking with a limp, she finally reaches a rushing river, where she confronts the stranger. Without hesitation, she jumps into the river, carried away by the current, to escape. After a while, she somehow makes it to the shore and walks through the forest with the help of a stick. She hears someone coming and thinks it's the stranger. She hits him with a stick on his chest, which makes him fall down. It turns out he's a hunter named Robert, who quickly aims his gun at Jessica to protect himself. Jessica begs him not to shoot. She tells him about the stranger and asks him to use his phone. But unfortunately, when Jessica hit him with the branch, it broke his phone. Robert agrees to help Jessica and gives her boots that belong to his wife. While they drive, he gives her food and water to eat. On their way to safety, they encounter a tree blocking the road, and Jessica immediately suspects it was put there by the stranger. She gets out of the car and tries to move it, but even with Robert's help, they can't budge it. The stranger shows up, and Robert tells Jessica to stay back by the tree so he can handle it. The stranger says Jessica is his sister, who is having mental issues after her husband died. The stranger tells him he just called off the search, and this isn't the first time it has happened. Jessica denies everything, leaving Robert as confused as my girlfriend trying to explain lipstick shades to me. The stranger moves closer to Jessica, trying to grab her, while she fights to push him away. She shouts at Robert to check his phone, and she manages to punch the stranger in the face to free herself. As she escapes, Robert aims his rifle at the stranger and demands to see his phone. Approaching Robert with the intention of handing over his phone, the stranger suddenly tackles him instead. He delivers severe punches to Robert's face before seizing the rifle and fatally shooting him in the head. Soon after, it starts raining, and Jessica runs through the forest while the stranger hunts for her. In the darkness of night, she seeks refuge in a small cave, but as she tries to leave, the stranger, hidden nearby, shoots her in the shoulder. Jessica collapses, but gets up and hides in the tall grass. She finds a small pond, where Jessica submerges herself to avoid detection. The stranger tries to provoke her by offering her a fair fight. He places the gun down and taunts her, calling her and her husband cowards. He cruelly blames her for her husband's suicide, but Jessica remains hidden. After the stranger gives up and leaves with the rifle, Jessica gets out of the pond and wanders through the forest until she collapses from exhaustion. The following morning, Jessica wakes up and continues her journey through the forest until she hears the engine of a car nearby. This woman has the absolute worst luck because it's the fucking Jeep and the stranger. From her hiding spot, Jessica is witnessing the stranger burying Robert's body in a nearby hole. Desperate to escape, she sneaks into the stranger's car but can't find the keys. However, she finds his phone, but when she sees him returning, she hides in the trunk. As the stranger drives off, Jessica calls the police, urging them to trace the call. When the stranger discovers his missing phone, he stops the car to search for it. Jessica prepares to defend herself and strikes the stranger with a tire iron on his head, causing him to speed up the car. He then tries to stab her with a knife, but Jessica manages to disarm him by hitting his arm with the tire iron and then uses the knife to wound him in the arm. In agony, the stranger loses control of the car and flips it down a hill. Jessica crawls out of the car and falls onto the mud, where she sees a police helicopter flying by. She follows it, but the helicopter fails to see her. Knowing the stranger is on his way, Jessica pulls out his phone and calls the stranger's wife. She questions the wife about her husband's whereabouts, and the wife innocently replies that he's on a business trip. Jessica shocks her by revealing that her husband is actually a kidnapper and murderer. When Sam makes his way into the clearing, Jessica yells out her own name and says that if she ends up dead, it's because Sam has killed her. Jessica throws the phone to him so he can speak to his wife. Sam picks up the phone, tells his wife he needs to take care of something, and hangs up the call. They get ready to fight to the death. Sam tries to attack Jessica, but she hits him with the tire iron, making him fall to the ground. Jessica misses a few swings, but she manages to hit him in the face, causing him to drop the knife. She tries to stab him, but he punches her in the stomach and starts to choke her. Sam punches her, seemingly knocking her out. He grabs the knife, but Jessica kicks him away. She hits him with the tire iron, but he stabs her in the leg. Jessica bites into his shoulder and tears off a chunk of his skin. While he is yelling out in pain, she grabs the knife and stabs him in the chest. As Sam dies, Jessica looks at him fearlessly. The helicopter returns to rescue her, and the story ends. If you enjoy this wild tale of nighttime antics, give it a thumbs up, hit that share button to spread the horror, drop a comment with your favorite part, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more adventures straight out of the imagination.